A girl with no shoes, no past, and nothing to lose trespassed into the most protected estate in the country. She didn't steal. She didn't speak. She danced. And in less than 60 seconds, the billionaire's crippled son started to move, proving a miracle was happening. But miracles always come with a price. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Before that tragic summer afternoon, Alistair had already tried everything to heal Ethan. Therapies, surgeries, doctors from 5 countries, but nothing could rebuild his son's shattered spirit until she appeared. Now she stood there, barefoot, trembling slightly from exhaustion, yet strangely unafraid, as Ethan, for the first time in months, leaned forward in his wheelchair, as though life had been breathed back into him. Alistair descended the final step into the garden, his eyes sharp as steel. "What is your name?" he demanded. The girl clutched the music box tighter. "Zuri! Why are you here? Who sent you? Did someone pay you to do this?" Zuri shook her head. "No one sent me. I saw him sitting alone. He looked..." Her voice broke for a moment. "He looked like me." Alistair's jaw tightened. "Like you?" Zuri nodded, glancing at Ethan with gentle eyes. "Like someone who forgot what happiness feels like." Before Alistair could respond, Ethan's weak voice cut through the air. "Dad, let her stay." It was not just the words. It was the way he said them. There was intent, emotion, a plea. Alistair froze. Zuri stepped back, bracing as though expecting to be dragged away. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind held its breath. Then Zuri's gaze drifted, past the hedges, toward the open sky, as if pulled into memory. She had once danced on busy streets to drown out hunger. Other orphans would huddle for warmth, but Zuri would spin under streetlights, pretending each flicker of light was applause from a world that hadn't yet forgotten her. Dancing wasn't entertainment, it was survival. If she stopped moving, grief would consume her. If she kept dancing, she could outrun the pain. Alistair studied the girl again, not just her clothes or the dirt on her hands, but the fire in her eyes. A fire born not from defiance, but from endurance. "You will stay," Alistair said slowly. "Only for the day." "And only where I can see you." Zuri nodded, relief washing over her face. She wound the music box again. The melody floated into the garden, soft and haunting. Then she danced. And this time, Ethan didn't just smile. He laughed. A rich, young, innocent laugh that burst through the silence like a miracle. Maids gasped from the windows. The head butler dropped his tray. One of the guards crossed himself in disbelief. Alistair stood frozen, his heart slamming with something he had not allowed himself to feel in a long time. Hope. He didn't say another word. He simply turned away, hiding the emotion burning in his eyes. Behind him, Zuri danced harder, as if she were dancing not just to entertain Ethan, but to bring him back to life. The sun dipped lower that evening, casting soft amber rays across the mansion's marble floors. Ethan was still in the garden, his cheeks flushed from laughter, his breathing shallow yet peaceful. Zuri sat cross-legged beside him, her music box resting gently in her lap as though it were a sacred object. Alistair stood on the balcony above, arms folded, face unreadable. He told himself he was only observing to ensure security, but deep inside, something unfamiliar tugged at his chest. Zuri wound the music box again. As the broken melody floated through the air, Ethan lifted his hand instinctively, trying to mimic her movements. His fingers twitched. Then, one finger curled. A gasp echoed through the garden. One of the maids dropped a watering can. The head butler clutched the balustrade of the balcony, eyes wide. Ethan blinked down at his hand, stunned, as if his own body had surprised him. Zuri didn't gasp. She smiled.
"Do it again,"
she whispered. Ethan tried. His finger jerked, then moved, twice. "Daddy!" Ethan called, his voice filled with excitement Alistair had not heard in nearly a year. "Did you see?" Alistair couldn't speak. His throat constricted as the scene blurred before him. Within minutes, Dr. Holmwood, Ethan's personal physician, arrived at the mansion. He ran his tests in disbelief, his usual professional composure shattered. "This is remarkable," he murmured, examining Ethan's fingers as they trembled with slight motion. "Neurological response triggered by emotional stimulation. This shouldn't be possible at this stage." He turned to Alistair, eyes wide. "Whatever that girl is doing, it's reaching parts of his mind and body that medicine could not." The staff, who once looked at Zuri with suspicion or disdain, now stared in quiet reverence. A maid approached Zuri with a blanket, another with tea. The guards who stood with crossed arms earlier now stepped aside when she passed. Zuri had entered the mansion as a trespasser. Now they watched her as though she were a beacon, fragile, yet divine. Alistair remained still on the balcony, one hand gripping the marble rail as though to steady himself. His heart ached with a strange mix of awe and fear. This girl, this stranger, had unlocked something no expert could. But why? And at what cost? As the doctor packed his equipment, he turned back to Alistair. "Sir," he said quietly, "if her presence can do this in a single day, imagine what is possible in a week." Below, Zuri wound the music box one more time. Ethan's laughter echoed into the dusk, and in the shadows of the balcony, the man who had controlled empires finally let a single tear fall, silently acknowledging what he had denied for so long. Healing had begun. Night had fallen over the Montgomery estate, yet the lights in Alistair's study still glowed. He stood behind his massive oak desk, staring through the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the garden where Zuri and Ethan had spent the day. His reflection stared back at him, powerful, composed, untouchable. But beneath the surface, his heart carried a fear he had never allowed himself to voice. What if she leaves? For months, nothing had reached Ethan, not doctors, not specialists, not even Alistair's own desperate attempts at fatherly comfort. And yet in a single day, this barefoot girl had awakened his son from emotional death. She had done what his billions could not. But miracles, Alistair knew, were temporary. People leave. Hope vanishes. And he could not bear to watch Ethan be abandoned again. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Zuri stood at the doorway, her posture humble yet unafraid. "You asked to see me, sir," she said quietly. Alistair gestured to the chair across from him. She sat carefully, clutching the music box in both hands. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, voice controlled but heavy. "What is it you truly want? Because if this is a game or a trick, when you walk away, my son will shatter." Zuri's eyes softened. She placed the music box gently on the desk. "When I was 9, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "my little brother and I were taken to a shelter. They said they would find us a home." She took a shaky breath. "But they didn't. He got sick. I tried to dance to make him laugh so he would forget the pain. One night, he stopped laughing." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "Since then, I danced to keep other people's hope alive, because I couldn't save his." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Alistair saw not an intruder, but a wounded soul choosing love over despair. Meanwhile, in the therapy room, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, eyes shut in concentration. Zuri had taught him to feel before trying to move. Suddenly, his toes twitched. Just once, barely noticeable, then again. A sharp breath escaped him. I felt that. The therapist gasped. "Sir!" he called out. Alistair and Zuri rushed into the room. Ethan looked up, eyes shining, not with fear, but with possibility. "I felt my foot," he whispered, smiling at Zuri. In that moment, something inside Alistair broke, not with pain, but with release. He turned to Zuri, his voice low, humbled. "You're not an intruder in this house," he said. "You may very well be the miracle we've been waiting for." By morning, silence was no longer the ruler of the Montgomery mansion. Hope was. Ethan awoke early, asking for Zuri before the sun had even touched the horizon. She appeared with the music box in hand, and he greeted her not with a whisper, but with a voice full of life. Even the staff moved with a strange lightness, as if a spell had been broken overnight. But outside those golden gates, another story was spreading. A headline blazed across social media. "Billionaire Alistair Montgomery takes homeless girl into mansion. Public divided." Within hours, paparazzi gathered outside the estate. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted through iron gates, demanding answers. Some called it charity, others called it madness. Alistair's phone buzzed relentlessly. Board members, investors, associates. He finally answered one. "Alistair," a cold voice barked, "is it true you have allowed a street girl to live in your private residence?" "She is helping my son," Alistair replied. "You are risking billions in assets," the board member snapped. "Our shareholders won't tolerate emotional decisions. What if she steals? What if this is a ploy? Remove her immediately before we lose credibility." Another call, then another, each one echoing the same message. Reputation over family, image over love. Meanwhile, in the garden, Ethan was laughing as Zuri danced. He turned and saw his father approaching. The laughter faded, replaced by determination. "Father," Ethan said in a clear, steady voice, "I want her to stay, not as a guest, as part of this home. Permanently." Alistair stared at his son. The boy who once wouldn't speak now defended someone society had thrown away. Ethan's eyes held strength, and something more powerful than pain, trust. Zuri stood silently, unsure if she belonged or if this was the moment she would be cast out again. Alistair's phone buzzed once more. He didn't look at it. He looked only at Ethan, then at Zuri, and at the tiny twitch in Ethan's leg that had begun just moments before. A twitch born not from medicine, but from joy. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but firm. "This home will not be governed by fear or reputation," Alistair said, his gaze unwavering. "It will be governed by what heals." Zuri's breath caught. Ethan smiled. But as Alistair turned away, his calm expression could not hide the storm gathering in his heart. Because he knew this decision would come with consequences. For empires fall in two ways, by greed and by love. The atmosphere in the mansion shifted the next morning. The air was heavy, as though the walls themselves sensed the storm approaching. A black luxury car rolled up to the gates. A stern man in a tailored suit stepped out, cold eyes sweeping across the estate with an authority that made even the guards pause. "I'm here for the girl," he said. Minutes later, he was escorted into the grand foyer where Alistair and Zuri stood waiting. Ethan watched anxiously from his wheelchair, fingers gripping the armrests. The man produced documents. "Her name is Zuri Adesola. She is a ward of the state, reported missing months ago. I have been tasked with returning her. By law, she cannot stay here." Zuri's face went pale. Alistair turned to her sharply. "Is this true?" Zuri hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but he's not here to protect me." She pointed to the man with trembling fingers. "He works for the same people who destroyed my guardian. People who once tried to take over your company." Alistair stiffened. Old memories surfaced, Boardroom betrayals, secret plots, a corporate enemy driven underground years ago. He had assumed the threat was gone. Zuri's voice broke. They want to use me. I'm the last witness to what they did. They'll twist the law to drag me back. Ethan's breathing quickened. Panic flooded his eyes. The suited man stepped forward. Enough lies. She comes with me. Now! Before Alistair could respond, Ethan cried out, Father, no! She's not lying! Tears formed in the boy's eyes as his chest heaved. If she leaves, I'll lose her. I'll lose everything. Zuri turned toward Ethan in alarm. His legs, which had shown signs of movement days earlier, began to spasm. His fingers clenched violently, his breathing turning shallow. Ethan! Zuri shouted, moving to his side. The doctor rushed in, summoned by the sudden medical emergency. He's going into neurological distress, the doctor warned urgently. His progress is reversing. Alistair's heart dropped. In one moment, he saw the truth laid bare. Zuri was not a danger. She was his son's lifeline. But danger was coming for her. And by extension, for them all. Ethan's voice shook as he reached out to Alistair with trembling fingers. Don't let them take her. Please. Zuri looked at Alistair. Homeless, unwanted, hunted, yet holding the key to his son's healing. Alistair faced the man in the suit. His voice was cold as steel. She's not leaving this house. The man narrowed his eyes. This is far from over. As he left, the storm he promised followed with him, one that would threaten everything Alistair had built, and everything he had just begun to feel again. The storm broke that evening, not in the sky, but in the heart of the mansion. Zuri stood in the foyer, surrounded by emotionless security guards. A suitcase, hastily packed by staff, sat at her feet. She clutched her music box to her chest, as though it were the last piece of her soul. It's for your safety, Alistair said, but his voice wavered. He stood rigid, battling the storm in his eyes. They will come for you. If you stay here, Ethan will be in danger too. I would never hurt him, Zuri whispered. I know, he replied softly. That's why you have to leave. Behind them, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, lips trembling. No, his voice cracked. No. Father, don't do this. Alistair turned away. The guards opened the door. Zuri stepped out into the cold night. The gates closed. Ethan's scream tore through the mansion like shattering glass. That night, the music box didn't play. The garden remained still. And for the first time since Zuri arrived, Ethan refused to sleep in his bed. He wheeled himself to the fountain and stayed there, silent, unmoving, his spirit collapsing back into the darkness he had just escaped. Days passed. He stopped eating. He refused therapy. He no longer responded to his father's voice. Doctors warned of severe regression. The spark that had returned to Ethan's eyes was gone. The small, miraculous movements in his fingers and toes vanished. The boy was fading again. Staff whispered in corridors. The mansion grew cold, not from temperature, but from grief. The echo of Zuri's laughter had been replaced by unbearable silence. On the third night, Alistair found Ethan unconscious on the floor beside his wheelchair. The music box Zuri had left behind lay open beside him, its winding key stilled. At the hospital, the doctors stabilized Ethan, but their words were grim. He is losing the will to live, the doctor said quietly. Without emotional stimulation, without that girl, we may lose him entirely. That evening, Alistair returned home alone. He entered his private study, closed the door, and for the first time in years, the man who ruled boardrooms and conquered empires broke. He sank to the floor beside his desk, shoulders shaking. No cameras, no witnesses, no pride. Just a father, grieving the cost of his own fear. A single tear fell, then another. Until the man known as the Iron Hand finally let himself feel what he had buried beneath wealth, power, and control. Regret. And one truth rose above the pain. He had pushed away the only person who could save his son. And if he didn't bring her back, he would lose Ethan forever. Alistair didn't sleep. As the first light of dawn crept across the sky, he was already in his car, tearing through the city streets with desperation in his eyes. Every alleyway he passed, every abandoned building, every shelter, he searched them all, calling Zuri's name in a voice that no longer belonged to a billionaire, but to a father begging heaven for mercy. Hours passed. Then he saw it. A small figure curled beside a dumpster in a narrow alleyway, barely breathing. The music box lay beside her, its lid broken. "Zuri!" he shouted, rushing forward. She didn't respond. Her skin was cold, her lips pale with hunger and exhaustion. He gathered her into his arms, carefully, reverently, like something sacred. "I was wrong," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, please forgive me." By the time he carried her back into the mansion, every staff member stood in stunned silence. Headmaids, guards, chefs, all froze as their powerful employer entered, holding the girl they had once feared. Alistair's voice broke as he spoke, not just to her, but to everyone. "She is not an intruder. She is our healer. The door she walked through once as a trespasser shall now remain open for her as family." Gasps echoed through the hall. At that very moment, Ethan was being wheeled into the grand foyer. His eyes flickered as he saw her. "Zuri," he whispered, voice trembling like a note of music long forgotten. Zuri stirred, weak, barely conscious. Then Alistair did something no one had ever witnessed. He knelt before her. "I am sorry," he said softly. "Please don't give up on him. On us." Tears slipped silently down Zuri's cheeks. With great effort, she wound the broken music box. The melody, though fractured, filled the air like a prayer rising. She stood shakily, then began to dance. Every movement came from her soul, not graceful but powerful. A dance not of entertainment, but of resurrection. Ethan's eyes widened. His fingers twitched, his hands clenched. Then he pushed himself up, slowly, trembling, fighting against gravity and fear. A deep silence fell. With every ounce of strength he had, Ethan stood. Not fully, not steadily, but his feet touched the ground beneath him. The mansion erupted. Cries of joy, gasps of disbelief, hands flying to mouths in awe. Some fell to their knees, others wept openly. Ethan laughed, a bright, free sound that filled the ceilings, chased away shadows, and brought life roaring back into the walls of the Montgomery estate. Zuri stopped dancing. Alistair's vision blurred with tears. Pride, relief, humility, all crashed over him like a tidal wave. Hope had returned. But this time, it would never be let go again. The news spread across every major network within hours. Billionaire Alistair Montgomery adopts homeless girl who healed his son. Miracle at the Montgomery mansion. Crippled heir walks again. Wealth meets humanity. A legacy of kindness begins. For the first time in years, reporters spoke not with suspicion, but with awe. The world that once judged Alistair now stood in admiration. Cameras flashed as Alistair, standing at a press conference, placed his hand gently on Zuri's shoulder. "She was once called a trespasser," he said, voice steady yet full of emotion. "But she is not a stranger to this home. She is the reason my son lives again. From this day forward, she is not a guest, not a miracle worker. She is my daughter. Gasps swept through the crowd. Zuri, overwhelmed, turned toward him with trembling lips, eyes glistening. Alistair looked back at her, no longer with the distance of power, but with the warmth of family. Beside them, Ethan stood, not seated, holding Zuri's hand tightly. His legs still shook, and a therapist stood nearby for support, but he was standing on his own. And with the press watching in stunned silence, Ethan took a single step, then another. Zuri matched his pace, smiling through tears. The cameras clicked wildly, but in that moment, none of them noticed. The world faded. Only this mattered. The boy who had forgotten joy now walked with it beside him. Days passed into weeks. Under Zuri's laughter-filled encouragement, Ethan progressed rapidly in therapy. Each step was celebrated in the mansion, not with grandeur but with genuine joy. Meals were shared at the same table. Alistair, once a man isolated by his own wealth, now found his evenings filled with stories, dance, and laughter. The mansion that was once silent now echoed with life. Final scene: the garden. The sun set in golden hues as Ethan walked slowly across the garden path, unaided. Zuri beside him, Alistair just behind. The fountain glistened where pain had once been rooted. The same place hope had been born. Zuri danced playfully ahead, her music box playing a soft, steady melody. Ethan laughed and quickened his steps to follow her. Alistair paused, watching them, hands in his pockets, a rare smile spreading across his face. For so long he believed wealth made him powerful. But in the end, it was love, humble, unexpected, unbought, that had rewritten his legacy. As the last light of day touched their faces, Ethan turned back. "Come on, Dad," he called joyfully. "You're falling behind." Alistair stepped forward, joining them on the path, not as a billionaire, but as a father. And Zuri was no longer the homeless girl who danced at his gates. She was the daughter he never knew he needed. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next. Don't forget to subscribe.